Hey, how's it going? Mike from LI Flies Mike, and we're going to be continuing our new series, Roll Your Own Fly. What we do is we take some dice, we take a table with materials and techniques listed, and we try to step outside the bound and let the dice decide what sort of materials and techniques we're going to be using. Today we're going to be continuing that, but focusing on Albie fishing as it's September. So rolling our dice here, we got a V-tie for techniques and a feather material for the tail section. Moving up to the body section, we have standard technique with some flash material tied in. And then for the head section, we have V-tie with you pick. So again, for the tail section, we have V-tie, feathers. We're going to be using Marabou for this, and this is the fun part. This is when you can essentially kind of look and see what sort of materials you have and decide if they're going to be appropriate or it's something that you can use for the type of technique you rolled up. As always, the full list of materials will be down in the description below, and we're going to be using the Mustad 34007 SS in size 1. This is a classic fly hook from Mustad. So we have to V-tie some feathers. So I decided Marabou will probably be the easiest way of doing this. And again, V-tying feathers is not a very conventional way of tying feathers when fly tying, but this is one of the reasons why we're doing this, is to kind of step outside of our normal fly tying boundaries and experiment with things. Well, what I'm going to do here is rip some of this off of the quill. Then I'm going to rip some of the more blunt ends off of the Marabou. And then I can take half of the Marabou, flip it over so that we have some natural taper on both sides. And then what we're going to do is just take this and tie this in. If you've never seen a V-tie before, we've tied many flies here on the channel with V-ties before. You essentially take the material, so the Marabou in this instance, we're going to tie it at an offset angle. And then all we need to do is fold back the front section in the opposite way and then wrap right on top of it. It's very simple, and we get a nice 3D profile. So I decided one V-tie isn't probably going to be enough, so we move slightly up the hook shank here, and we're going to go ahead and tie another small section of V-tied Marabou. Now some of those butt sections were kind of rough looking, so I just used my fingers here and kind of plucked through and pulled off the pieces I didn't like. So we're going to be trying to replicate snappers, which is what we call juvenile bluefish here on Long Island. It's very popular for young kids to go snapper fishing, and it's essentially just baby bluefish is what they are. For the flash material for the body, I decided angel hair tied in standard is going to give us a nice body section with some actual 3D profile while still giving us some nice flash. So we're going to be using some pearl for the belly section, and then we're going to be using some lighter blues, then ascending up to some darker blues or sardina colors. But starting off with pearl for the belly here, and then we're going with a lighter blue for the top, or medium blue, I guess you could call it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move forward. So we're just going to tie collars of this angel hair, and this is what I call a standard tie, which is what essentially just tying the material on straight off the back, not doing any sort of fancy techniques. So now for the second tie here, we are going to be using some of this sardina color, and this is just a mix of some blues and olives and greens, really just to give us some nice variety in the color of the fly. What you see a lot in juvenile bluefish or even adult bluefish is a lot of blues, light blues, darker blues, even purples, and when the light reflects off of their scales. So blue is a very common color, and the pearl is a nice complement to this. You could go with a silvery body if you'd like, but I like the pearl to go with the kinky fiber we're going to be adding for the head section. So this is our third and final angel body hair tie, or win-in flash tie. I consider the two to be very similar. We had a discussion about it on stream recently. But any sort of very thin, sort of tinsel-like flash like this, I consider to be angel hair or win-in flash. So now we're going to take our brush and brush this out here, because it's always a good idea when working with synthetics or even feathers or natural materials to brush out the fly at times, depending on how you tie it. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take a section of Steve Farrar fiber or kinky fiber, slinky fiber, whatever you like to use. This is Steve Farrar fiber for the belly and Slinky fiber for the top, because it's just what I had on hand. And we're going to use some white for the belly and some blue for the top here. And again, just tie this in a V-tie section. So I figured we roll V-tie and we got U-pick. So this is essentially a kinky muddler head with a flash body and a V-tied Marabou tail. But this is the interesting thing, is that I would have never tried a kinky muddler variation like this if I would have never rolled it up on the table. It's one of the interesting things about this series, or this little fun game you can play, is that it forces you to step outside the box a little bit, or step outside your boundary as a fly tire, but generally it leads to some nice surprises. So now for the last tie here, as we usually do with the kinky muddler, if you haven't checked out the kinky muddler video that we've done for the roosterfish flies, check it out. Johnny Keynes is a great fly designer. He developed this fly. What we're going to do is we're actually going to do a half hollow, I like to call it. So instead of tying it with all of the material facing off the front with the butt ends tied near the hook eye, for instance, we're actually going to tie this on the middle. We're going to tie the material on the middle. So half of the material's going back and half of the material's going forward. And then we fold it back and do our hollow tie. I call this a half hollow. I don't know if there's another name or technique for this. If there is, let me know in the comments. But we deemed it the half hollow in our fly tying streams, and I do this a lot with things like Sentinel's laser dub. So now we can go ahead and throw some whip finishes in here. I'm just trying to get the thread right where I like it to make it easy to whip finish, and then we can start trimming the head after brushing it out. So this is after brushing it out, and there's a very simple way of trimming these kinky muddlers. You take your fingers and you pinch the head and you just follow your thumb. Now here I'm going a little bit more exaggerated than my thumb because I've trimmed so many of these by now, but you can essentially use your thumb and index finger if you pinch the fly along the hook shank and use that as a guide. And then what I like to do is I like to start working on the sides or the bottom, whichever way you go. We're just going to slowly take material off. It's important not to take too much material off, so because you can never put it back on, right? So just go slow and angle your scissors outwards. It's very important to angle your scissors outwards like I am doing here, because if you actually angle your scissors inwards, you could potentially cut way too much and you can cut right down, potentially even cutting the marabou off or the feathers. So it's important to keep those scissors angled outwards. And then what I usually do is I work on the sides and I slowly just trim the sides. If I need to, I can continue working my way around. It's a good idea to spin your vise. This is why having a rotary vise is nice, like my Regal, because that way you can actually kind of get like a 360 view of the fly without having to take it on and off the vise. So now here you can see the profile that we're working with. We are going to do one more trim, but before we do that, we need to put some eyes on here. So these are 1/4 inch silver eyes, and these are 3D stick-on eyes. Unfortunately, the adhesive on the back's not enough, so we're going to be using some E6000, and this is some essentially like construction industrial strength adhesive. It's a industrial version of the old shoe glue, or the shoe glue that you can buy nowadays in construction stores or your local hardware store. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this, put this on. I like to spread it onto the area where the eye will go, and then take a little bit more, put it on there. And I always put it more forward than I like, and I push the eye down and then push back. And what that does is it spreads the glue evenly behind the eye. So now what we're going to do to finish off this fly is use something called liquid fusion, which is actually a water-based adhesive. You can get this at some craft stores, or you can buy it off Amazon. What we're going to do with this is essentially put a dollop on each eye and then spread that around. You want to make sure you get behind the eyes. You want to make sure you get completely 360 degrees covering the base of where that eye is touching the material, so we get a nice adhesion point. And then we're going to work this around and essentially kind of as if we were doing a UV resin head on a deceiver or something. The nice thing about the liquid fusion is that it dries very thin. So what happens is that it thins out a lot once it dries. So you get a nice thin coat, but a nice durable finish to it. And as we're working the liquid fusion around, we're also taking excess and working some of that into the material as we're taking excess off. So now, normally you wait for the fly to dry about 24 hours, and then what you do is you trim the fly on top and bottom and on the sides if you need to. You never really want to trim too much, but just enough to catch any of those loose hairs that have stiffened up and are now extremely obvious. Again, it's always a good idea to let it dry 24 hours before fishing it because it is a water-based glue. Sometimes it can turn cloudy and stuff, and I found even with liquid fusion it can turn a little cloudy at times after fishing it for a while, and then you let it dry, it'll clear back up. So we're going to take this down to the local jetty and try and catch some albies. About it. Yesterday they came really close over here, so yeah. Yeah, it was around like 9 to 1 or something, 10 to 1. 9 to 1? That many hours? Yeah. Ooh, that's fun. Yeah, that's my buddy. We were out on the boat yesterday and then we left, and then they started blowing up after we left, so. No, you're good, dude. Yeah, see? They just porpoise like 300 meters out. Yeah? Yeah, he saw him. Well, as you can see, the Albies didn't really want to cooperate with us. It was quite rough weather the week that I filmed this. It was blowing about 15 to 25 every day, and from a pretty rough direction to be able to effectively fish. But you could see at some point in the video we weren't really able to catch it on film, but after my buddy Jeff left on his boat, the fish did pop up for about 3 seconds, and me and the two guys with the spinning rods right next to us, I was screaming. I was like, "Get it in there!" And we all got I got my fly in there, and they got their hoagie jigs in there, but none of us could hook up, and that was the only sign we had for the day. So Jeff did manage to get a fish or two out in the ocean. So this is the part of the reality of fishing for Albies from shore, is it can be really tough at times when they don't cooperate. So we're actually going to be making an in-depth video on that, which is going to be coming out here probably at some point next week, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully you enjoyed the second episode of Roll Your Own Fly. Unfortunately, we didn't catch anything on it, but I gotta say, this fly is fantastic. I'm gonna start tying these and throw a couple in the box for this Albie and striper season for the fall. So I've been trying to fish as much as I can for Albies, but I still have a ton of commercial fly tying, so I am quite busy. But like I said, we will have an in-depth video on fishing for Albies from shore, and then we'll be working on one for fishing for Albies from boats as well. Middle of October or so, we're going to start transitioning to striped bass and striper flies and fly fishing for striped bass in the surf, so stay tuned for that. Well, my name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. We have fly tying and fly fishing videos coming out every week. We have live fly tying on Friday nights and early access for members. Well, thank you so much. Have a great season out there this year. And as always, tight lines.